exactly why.
Okay. Is Kat here?
It's right there.
Oh, I forgot you were down on the floor. Sorry, you don't rate. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 7:02. Kat, could you take the roll call, please?
Brian Boyle.
Here.
Lee Doobie.
Here.
Kim Farah.
Here.
Barbara Kishka.
Here.
Sarah, excuse me, Sheila Lowe's.
Here.
Sarah Muckamar. Kristen, all over the place here. Sean O'Neill.
Present.
Kristen Savage. And Jennifer Silva.
Okay. All right, if you could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of the minutes. Looking to approve the minutes from October 1.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular business meeting minutes of October 1st, 2020.
Sheila makes the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Barbara seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Roll call, right?
No, we're in person.
No, we're not doing
What?
Okay, I'm sorry.
We just gotta raise
Raise your
hands.
I'm
hand.
good.
Raise hands.
Barbara, are you a yes?
Yes.
So
I thought we were done.
6-0. 6-0. Moving on to delegates and individuals. Are there any delegates and individuals for this evening? Okay. I will ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes and also that you stay masked while speaking.
Good evening, Stephanie Doobie, Danville, New Hampshire. I just want to make one quick request of the school board. So I can appreciate that you all are working very hard to get the kids back to school full-time, 5 days a week. I do think that parents need to hear more about what you all are doing kind of on a weekly basis as opposed to every couple of weeks or every month. So I would ask that there be some sort of mechanism whereby the school board can relay how they're doing on a weekly basis back to the parents. I think that would really be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Paul Blair, Atkinson. I'd like to begin by thanking the board for their recent efforts to get the kids back in the classroom. It's definitely noticed and it's definitely appreciated. And I'm speaking in hopes that the board can actually implement the proposed start date of October 19th for your phased return, starting with the lower grades. Many families continue to struggle to maintain unsustainable situations, and that's associated with the current setup. So we do implore you to move forward with the current plan, putting those kids back in the classroom for 4 days. The COVID numbers and cases in all of our towns are 5 or less. I know there have been a recent uptick in some other areas in New Hampshire, but all the towns we serve have like 1 to 4 with the exception of Plastow that has 5. So the numbers our towns serve are also extremely low. And I want to make sure they stay that way. Today, Governor Sununu announced that there was a ban on some sporting events. It was mostly associated with hockey. They had said that there was at least 24 different schools, K through 12, that were affected by this. In other words, the infection was brought into the school and passed on to other people. And that was being associated with some of these events. So I'm not saying that we need to take any drastic action, but being that our threshold is very low for infection rates, I asked the board to keep a close eye on any activities, extracurricular, whatever they may be, sports and otherwise, just to make sure that we can actually deliver on what our #1 goal should be, which is getting those kids in school. So we asked the board to keep a close eye on those activities and the COVID trends that we see therein. It may be a little too early to pin that, but I do think it's very important. That's something that we continue to look at, just to make sure that we're putting the kids' education on top of our list of priorities. If we identify any activities that contribute to cases coming into our schools, or even community infection rates in Rockingham County that are rising, we ask that this board take whatever actions they deem necessary, and also if they are in the board's power. Obviously, you can't enforce things that are going on outside of school activities, but whatever they can in their power to abate this, to keep our kids in school and allow them to get in school 5 days. Massachusetts has a much lower infection rate threshold for putting kids in remote. They have a 4% threshold. We don't have that luxury here in New Hampshire by the numbers that we've all established in New Hampshire metrics. So I do feel it's really prudent and important that we stay on top of those numbers to keep our kids in school. We don't have that 4% liberty. We have to be extra vigilant in limiting our risk so we can keep our kids in school. And lastly, I just wanted to say one more time, thank you all for your work thus far, sincerely. And we look forward to seeing the kids back in the classroom as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening, Coral Hampy, Danville. I have been president of the TTA for merely a month, but I have learned that there are two major aspects to my role and a goal that has grown from these aspects. One aspect is to advocate for my members. Most advocating happens during negotiations and more recently in writing the MOU. I will advocate for what is fair and respectful. Tonight, I advocate for the truth of who decides which phase of the plan we are in. Paragraph 2 of the MOU states, "It is expressly understood by the parties that it is the sole authority of the Timberlane Regional School Board and/or district to approve reopening plans and procedures, and that this MOU is meant to address the impact of the board's decision which necessitates negotiation over those issues." Respectfully, Dr. Fair, if I may ask, can either union block or stop any changes to the reopen plan? Can
Not
either
that
union?
I am aware of, no.
Oh, good, thank you. That's please, let's all work together on this. Which brings me to my goal. Our district is comprised of parents, kids, teachers, staff members, admin, and many more. We all have the best for kids at the core of our decisions we make. So why can't we just get along? My very lofty goal is to change the negative environment we have made for ourselves. I would like for all of us to get to a point where we can converse respectfully about the future for our kids. In April, teachers were revered and thanked for their work. Now we are vilified for asking if the HVAC systems are up to date. I don't expect things to change overnight, and I hope that going forward we can communicate better and dispel myths early on in an effort to achieve a more positive environment. Will you join me? Hopefully. The second major aspect of my new role is to speak for the members. Tonight, I would like to speak to the wonderful things our staff members are doing across the district to engage or help students. We are so lucky to have those people in our schools. For instance, kids are going outside for small group work. Teachers have been creating routines for kids that they have gotten used to. The morning announcements are shared not only online for the remote students, but also in school, focusing around the CARES, challenge, acceptance, responsibility, empower, empathy, self-control. I like this one. They're using chalk outside for handwriting skills. That's fun. Whole grade level meetings are causing unity and being connective for the kids. Paras are finding unique and effective ways to support learning. Teachers are willing to grow and learn to support families. Using Seesaw, a new learning platform we have, and the kids are enjoying the activities on there. Building relationships with kids, get to know each other and interact positively. Germinating green bead seeds. This is being done at home. Teachers took the time to make home kits for every one of their students so that the kids can work on that at home so everybody's growing together. There is a haunted neighborhood map project being started basing map skills, and it's technology-based. We are sharpening order of operation skills by playing bingo and Kahoot. We're watching The Book of Life in Spanish. 8th graders wrote complete sentences about it. 6th and 7th graders wrote sentences and words to show their understanding. STEAM class are making electronic Halloween decorations. They're learning about informational text using various topics like soap through the ages, Malala, and canine search and rescue dogs. The library is having a virtual book fair, and classes are using Pear Deck and HyperDocs to discuss self-esteem and coping skills. And just want to give a quick shout out, very short, to the other people in our buildings, the front office staff, the administrative assistants, the technology coordinators. They are running materials for kids. They watch students when parents are late to pick them up from sports after their contract time. They track down lost items, they go to the gym, they go to the lost and found. They're answering phone calls and parent questions and making Ethernet cords to boost the internet signal so that we do not drop Zoom so often. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Now to our student rep. Are we on the other side?
I was so excited today to hear from the middle school about all of the fun things that they've been doing and the fact that they're finally feeling like they're a part of a community and that they're getting into a routine since they had a later start than many other people. Their fall athletics are going very well, and they just want to commend the athletes and all of the coaches for the hard work that they've done. At Sandown TLC, they're all working very hard in literacy groups, and Sandown TLC, as well as all of the elementary schools, are getting very excited about Halloween. They're incorporating Halloween crafts and activities, and some of the schools are even dissecting pumpkins and using the pumpkin seeds to work on science activities. They want to extend a big thank you to all of the teachers, administrators, all of the educators, and the hardworking faculty that are keeping everyone safe and healthy every single day. At the high school, things are going very well with athletics. The games are in full swing, and everyone has a real sense of community now that they feel like things are going back to some sense of normalcy. The clubs, activities, and honor societies are also in full swing. Applications have just closed for most honor societies, and students will be hearing back shortly. And I would just like to say a big thank you to everyone, all of the delegates and individuals in the last several meetings that have come forward to speak on behalf of the students. Being in school right now is a very interesting time, to say the least. I am dealing with students every single day who come to me genuinely afraid or scared because they don't really know about the cases that are going on, or the investigations going on looking into contact tracing and everything. So although myself and many of my peers would love to be in school, full-time, everyone there, making it feel like last year, I just want to say to everyone listening and everyone here in the building right now that students are afraid for their safety and health, just like we all are every time we go to the grocery store or we go out in public, and that truly seeing a student comfortable and safe and happy is so much more important to me, and I'm sure a lot of people, than to make our school look good just because we're all in person. So it's been my job to try and reassure students and tell them that, the board is working diligently and that everyone is going to be safe and happy. But please, I just urge everyone here to take a deep breath and, like Ms. Hamphy said, to, try and work together all as a team, because truly the only thing that everyone wants here is for students to feel safe and happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to current business, the first thing on the agenda is the school reopening update. And so board members, in your packet, you have an executive summary on the proposed amended return to school plan. As you recall, last meeting, we tasked the administration to develop and implement a plan to transition to a 4-day in-school model of instruction. to date, the schools have been working on transitioning very high need and at-risk students back into the building 4 days a week. They have reviewed all the factors that we need to consider as we move back to 4 days a week. They've done an excellent summary. I'm really just speaking for the public's benefit here. Preschool students have been into full programming, 2 half-day sessions from the first day of school on October 5th. Pre-K began attending full programming. On October 19th, all kindergarten students in the default cohort model that we started will transition to 4 on-site days and 1 remote day. As we move forward, when we get into grades 2 through 12, there's a lot more complexity that needs to be considered as we move into those cohorts. Some of these include staffing, accommodations, space restrictions. We also have to look at bus capacity and the logistics for lunches and snacks. If we are to move to this updated model and try to go for a full return as of December 7th, which is the end of the trimester for the elementary and middle school, that is going to require that we update the plan to reflect a minimum of 3 feet distance with mandatory masks. So I'll be looking for that motion if we decide that this is the plan that we are trying to move forward. So the administrators, and kudos to Mrs. Kanotis, Mr. Pedersen, and Mrs. Allaire for putting this together, are still working to determine how to bring all these students back, but given that we're looking at a full return December 7th, that gives us about a month to work out some of these challenges that we're going to face, and also parents' time to prepare. We did ask parents to commit to the first trimester, so I think it's important that we honor that commitment in that way. So I'm going to open the floor to questions. Barbara?
Do I understand from reading this that in the cafeteria, in some places, it's going to be 3 feet with no masks?
Mrs. Allaire, I think this is one of the things, this is one of the, whoever wants to answer that, it has been a limiting factor. I'll let the staff speak to that. They're still looking to try to work this so we don't have that issue. So go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Farah, for summarizing that. So in the executive summary, we presented a series of what we've identified as limiting factors right now, which would prohibit us from meeting some of the CDC guidelines as they are now. One of them is the cafeteria lunches. At the elementary level, where students are eating in the classrooms right now, they are maintaining 6-foot distancing without masks when they eat. Once we bring additional students in the buildings, we would be under 6 feet without masks during times when students are eating. So currently, we are working on a solution for that. We have additional research to do. Other area schools that have gone to a full return, that have systems in place to effectively eat lunches where students are without masks. So we are actively involved in acquiring that information to develop our own plans, but right now, that is a significant concern that we've identified.
And I do want to say thank you so much for, I can tell there was a lot of effort put into making this happen. This is a very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian?
In regards to eating, I guess the restaurant's been open now for months. And you walk into a restaurant with your family, and they don't have masks while they're eating, which obviously you can't have a mask while you're eating. Why would that be an issue?
Yeah, so the CDC guidance, if you look into it, around social distancing, there are qualifying factors that pertain to people who live in your own home. And if you are out in public with people who do not reside in your bubble, for lack of a better term. So the recommendations are 6 feet. If you are not with that small circle of people that you were at the restaurant with, but.
So the restaurants are not a system. That's what we're saying, I guess. Huh?
Well, one other factor is that in a restaurant and in other situations, people who live together and already have close contact are allowed to sit close together within that boundaries, because it's not going to increase spread as a result of that. Similarly, when we have athletic events, family members can sit next to each other and not have to social distance, because we know that there's already close contact there, and this wouldn't increase spread. The question becomes, if you have elementary students, for example, taking masks off in order to have lunch or to have snack during the day, how does that impact? Because in fact, those people are not living together and don't have that common experience. And so there is a possibility of spread, and that's why we have to be as careful as we can.
Sean?
To expand on what Mr. Boyle was saying is that I've seen in many establishments that have a bar and stuff that people are eating, and all the chairs are taken, and not everybody's family related. And you just go down in a bar and you don't see 6 feet of distance in between people. So I think in the restaurant industry, a table is usually, you don't have just we don't have family style eating pretty much here in the U.S. It's more of a European thing. So that just by nature you would have, a cohort of a family together and stuff like that sitting at a table, but it still exists in the establishment where people that do not know each other can be sitting next to each other in an eating environment.
We have committed to adhere to the CDC guidelines, and certainly what people want to do at their own discretion is certainly fine. I couldn't tell you that last time I've been in a restaurant personally, because I don't go in restaurants right now. So it's neither here nor there. If we're looking to not adhere to CDC guidelines, then that's going to take another board vote. So right now, the CDC guidelines is 3 feet. And so what the staff is trying to do is to at least maintain a minimum of 3 to 6 feet with masks. And this is difficult. The lunch situation is the biggest difficulty. And I don't want to speak to what some of the solutions are, but they are working on workarounds. I mean, you do have other large spaces that you could potentially use, but it would then mean shuffling. Say, if you used half the gym, you might want to, you might have to move gym classes around. So these are some of the logistics that they have to work. But you also have to think about, and this is part of the reason I feel like we should have some lead time on this. There are parents that may have been okay with their kid in a school if there was a 6 feet with masks, but they may be looking to transition out if it's 3 feet with a mask. So this is why, another reason, as much as we would like to get more students into the schools sooner, I think once we put out that certain schools, and this also needs to put out, Danville, for instance, you can maintain a 6-foot distance in those classrooms with all the students in, but Sandown you can't. So this needs to get put out by school as to what's going to happen, because I think parents are going to be, you may find some more changes that are then going to have to be staffing changes, and there's going to be some time to prepare. So as much as we'd like to go sooner, I did have conversations this week with the staff. I just don't see logistically how you can do it. So, but to your point, Sean, if you're trying to make a motion that we don't follow the CDC guidelines, we could certainly do that, but that would call for a change in the plan. So, wait, Sean, did you want to respond to that?
I'd like to respond before Sean. Are you suggesting, Kim, that the restaurants aren't following CDC guidelines?
I cannot categorically have a discussion about which restaurants are and which are not, but my understanding was that restaurants at some point, and maybe it's changed now, were spacing tables further apart.
They are, but I bring that up because you're talking about eating. We're talking about cafeteria eating. That's why I brought it up. And as sure as I'm sitting here, I can guarantee you that those aren't just family members sitting at restaurants. People aren't IDing people. I just threw it out there because that's what is going on today in our country as we try to open things up. People are sitting at tables so many feet apart, and that's all. And obviously you cannot eat with a mask on. That's why I really brought it up.
Okay. Sheila?
First, I'm going to be that person to say thank you very much for all this information. This was a lot. So I know you guys are killing yourselves to try to get this stuff to us. That's number one. Number two, I am glad that we're waiting until December 7th and taking some time. We have not rushed this. We have not thrown all these kids into the schools purposely, so that we did it carefully, we did it safely, we did it the right way so that we wouldn't have to resort back to a full remote. And I'm hoping that people understand that. Also, to add to that, you look at the month of November, you've got 1 full week. We have elections, we have Thanksgiving, we have Veterans Day. So even if you put them back, they're not there for a full week, because you have all these days off. It's the November that never happens as far as class time. It was even when we had a full vote in. I understand the issues we're having with Sandown North, especially, because we had issues anyways with spacing. But I would like to see, I have no interest in changing this plan that doesn't follow the CDC guidelines. So I'm going to ask that we continue onward and see if we can do the best that we can to get these kids back in on December 7th, and I'd like to stick to that date. I think, we can't just keep flopping on these parents either. Although some are going to complain that we should be doing it right away to get them back to work, and then others are going to complain, well, you didn't give us enough time to get the kids in. We committed to the first trimester. We asked the parents to commit to the first trimester, and I'd like to keep to that word. But it's good work.
So again,
I'm interested in seeing what you can come back with for the cafeteria issues. That's what I'm.
Well, they'll definitely be coming back to us on this to update us on how we're going to address some of the limiting factors, because it's not only cafeteria, it's busing.
Right.
We may also find that now we have a staffing issue that we may need to address. So, but in order for them to even move forward with this sort of return, we're going to need a motion to update the plan to reflect a minimum of 3 feet. Right now, it reflects a minimum of 6 with mandatory masks. So I'd be looking for that motion.
I'll make that motion.
Sean makes the motion, Sheila seconds. Is there any further discussion?
And that's with masks?
Excuse
With
me?
masks.
With masks, yes.
Still with masks.
All in favor? I guess we're, no,
I have a
8-0, 8-0. Oh, sorry,
I did have a question.
okay.
I was wondering if I could ask them, how have the kids been with wearing the masks? Have we had any trouble with kids not wearing them?
We have several teachers and administrators who repeatedly tell us how great the students are doing and how wonderful they are with keeping those masks on. Obviously, we have students that need reminders, and our youngest learners might need a little support to keep that mask up, but they're doing a fantastic job, better than expected.
Fantastic.
Madam
Sean?
Chair, part of the topic that got discussed tonight is the Sandown Elementary. We're sort of having some issues with the trying to get all the kids back compared to other schools. And I know with this process, we try to leave everything, anything to be added to the table here to discuss. Have we actually thought about allowing students from one district to cross-pollinate into another district where there's room available?
You mean into another town?
Yeah, another town at the elementary.
You said district, that's why we're all looking at you.
Let's let
They're not going to
I don't think we can.
Mrs. Kennard, well, the Articles of Agreement call that we are required to provide a school in each town, but that doesn't mean that you could not volunteer. I think you can voluntarily move, correct?
You absolutely could voluntarily move. I think, though, to just answer or sort of to clarify the point, what Dr. Farrow was referring to earlier is that in Danville, based on our current student numbers in the cohort, we only have 2 classrooms that would be less than 6 feet. Yet at Pollard and Sandown, when we bring those classes back, those kids will only be at 3 feet. So the challenge isn't that we can't, the challenge is that the spacing is going to be different school to school, and that those measurements are based on the current numbers of students in cohort. So if we see a huge influx of students who were remote come into the cohort, then we'll have to have another look at that and have another conversation. But that is why we're looking to survey families in the beginning of November, so that we can have a good solid 3 weeks to really look at the numbers and how those classrooms could potentially be shifting.
Okay. All right. Moving on then,
Do we take a vote? We took
we
the
did
vote.
take the vote. And
Sorry.
we voted, and then Barbara asked the question.
Sorry.
The next thing on the agenda here is the HVAC update. There was a reassessment of the deficient rooms in the Lawson report. We don't have any data though here to say what.
Not significant. We're still in the planning stages in terms of how we're going to try and test all the buildings and then what work to prioritize. Mr. Parity is working with BA Dowd on that. It's a fair amount of time. We have a couple of quotes. We're trying to right now use our internal capacity. We're going to buy an extra set of testing equipment, but it is going to be relatively long. I believe that we had a quote to have Lawson do the whole thing, and it was in the range of about $50,000,
Right,
but they could do it quickly.
52,000 for them to come in and do every room,
To test every room?
to test every room.
Test every room.
One time.
Excuse me?
One time?
One time.
Yes.
Which to me, we'd be better off buying more equipment and doing it ourselves, because then we have the equipment and we can redo it. We've already validated that our test results are similar to Lawson, so it looks like they've ordered other equipment for this.
And just a question, there, how much was the equipment, to buy the second set of equipment?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I was looking to see what, Jeff, do you know what the cost is of a second set of testing equipment for HVAC?
Was it less than $52,000? Thank you.
Yeah, this equipment is not that expensive
No.
for testing. I looked it up just to see what it was. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's under 1,000 per setup.
Jen?
These filters that are scheduled for October 15th delivery, were these the filters that were ordered the first? Or is this the second batch of filters?
Jeff, do you know, when were these filters ordered? Yeah.
So we've moved to a monthly filter change cycle, so the filters for October 15th would be the second change we would have changed last month as well.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, if, because I knew we had ordered them way before, and I thought they'd already come in, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
So now we're going for our next shorter term filter change.
Okay.
Did they arrive today, Jeff? Did they arrive?
Today's the 15th.
I believe they're in the process of doing the filter changes this month as well. So.
Like,
One other question, maybe Jeff, you have the answer. There was an option for purifiers in areas that required immediate attention. Do you know how many of those would be required?
We're still looking into getting the exact numbers. We've come up with better results on the second round of testing that we're doing. So we're looking at those options as we speak. I don't know what the total number would be though.
Thank
Jen?
you.
Do we know what the turnaround time would be on ordering those purifiers and getting them?
I don't think it would be very long.
Okay.
Jeff, I think I asked this to Gary. I'm not really sure I got the answer I was looking for, but it seems pretty excessive to me to be changing filters monthly.
I think it's important to determine what the right change cycle is going to be, and that really is dependent on our outside factors. So, for example, we are coming out of a heavier pollen season with the fall, and the filters are doing their job. And as of right now, we know that 3 months is too long. We're going to try a month, see where we end up, and if the results aren't noticeably too in a month, if we can stretch it out, maybe 2 months is the right time frame. But right now, we're erring on the side of caution and addressing them to make sure that we can, well, Brian, you have to remember that the filtration that we're using does not allow as much airflow, so it is much more sensitive to outside contaminants, particulates getting caught in it. It turns out 3 months was too long. So if 2 months is...
That's where it's fine, but aren't there
Sorry?
any, it's not factory recommendations?
Really, it would depend on the use, how often, how frequently they're being used. And again, we know that 3 months is too long. And we know that if 1 month seems to keep things going, if we can stretch it out to 6 weeks, see what happens. I don't think we're in an environment to let it go. I'd rather go on the shorter end and play it out, see how it works, instead of trying to go for 2 months and then realize that 2 months is too long. So we're erring on the side of caution here to make sure we have the best learning environments for our students and teachers.
Okay, but we don't need to play a guessing game 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. You can quantitatively measure rooms. Pick a series of rooms, probably the rooms at Lawson, and measure them every other day or twice a week so that you will be able to see the drop in the efficiency as those filters start to get clogged. So I don't like the idea of, oh, well, 3 is too long, one might not be long enough. These are, we're talking a large expense over time, even between a 4-week versus a 6-week. So let's have a plan that you are doing it based on quantitative measurements, not a guess that 1 month is good,
Yep.
So can we take that as an action item? I want to see what the plan is to quantitatively address where our filters are, because 1 month may not be good. It maybe should be 3 weeks, or there might be wings where it's 3 weeks. So,
And that's it.
or it might change now that all the leaves have dropped down. So, I don't like to just make an arbitrary sort of.
Yep, I would agree.
I agree.
Thank you. Brian?
Just going to mention that Mr. Dowd and I can work with Mr. Parity to develop the plan and report that back to the board.
Great, thank you. I think that's all on HVAC rebalancing. There's an executive summary here on Chromebooks. We got some good news.
Yeah, where's Ken?
Mr. Henderson, thank you.
Yay.
Good news. The bad news is the prices have gone up.
Of
right?
course.
Of course. But thank you for that. Are there any questions on this summary on the Chromebooks?
What are you gonna do?
I know.
Can I ask, how did they increase from 158 to 174 if we placed an order for them back in
Supply
June,
and
July,
demand.
May? I mean, that would be the price.
That's a good question, fair question.
It was due to the cost of the materials going up by the manufacturer that they're obviously passing on to us. Now, in normal times, I'd pull those POs off because that's a violation of the RFP. However, I can tell you right now, we're going to pay a lot more than that if I go back out there, and I probably won't even get the Chromebooks at this point. We'll be back at the end of the line to get them. So it was kind of like, I talked to Dr. Cochran about it. We decided to stay the course.
Yeah.
And luckily, we're getting them sooner than later now.
Now, I have a silly question.
Go
I'll
ahead.
ask it anyways.
Go ahead.
Should we order earlier next year, knowing that we have the 6th and the 9th graders going in? And then
I'm sorry, did you say order them now for next year?
no, I didn't say now, God no. Earlier.
Well, we can. Typical budget issues with that are that the monies become available July 1st. Now, last year we did, you guys were great in getting us money early so that we were able to get those orders in early June. Because if we didn't do that, honestly, we wouldn't be getting them in a couple weeks.
Right.
We could look at that again, and I will be talking to our vendors, and I can bring it to the board, the option to get those early again if you guys, if that,
Yeah, can we
if your
keep it in the
pleasure.
back of our mind for like April?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great
You
idea.
know what I'm saying? Just because
Yeah.
I don't want to run into this again.
Yeah, no,
God
it makes
forbid
sense.
Agree.
Something else happens.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Cochran?
Mr. Henderson, I know in some cases in prior districts, we've been able to do at least a purchase that we can buy out at any time and pay the remaining amount. Is that a strategy that we might want to look at in terms of being able to put some money down and purchase them earlier, but still use the 21-22 budget monies for the vast majority of that purchase.
Gotcha.
And-
Yep, I
And
can look into
therefore,
that. Yeah, I can bring-
move ourselves up in the queue in terms of getting them.
Yep, I can, options are good, right? So I'll bring those numbers back. and we
Options
can-
are great right
We can
now.
talk about those, yeah. Good idea.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Right,
Really
thanks.
good news for a change. That's good news.
The next item on the update, reopening update are the COVID numbers. Not sure who put this together. Mr. Pedersen, did you put this
With
together?
Mr. Pedersen.
Nice job. So are we going to now start posting this on district websites so that parents can see this? Do you want to speak to this a little bit? So the board has in front of them a weekly dashboard of positive cases, number, students under isolation, quarantine, staff quarantine, active cases in Rockingham, so on and so forth.
So the data that you're seeing in front of you for a week, I'm doing the data Wednesday to Wednesday, but that data now is on every school website. So we have a dashboard, if you will, that looks very similar to this with the data, and then a key that sort of interprets what the colors mean, what these numbers actually mean compared to one another. But so that is live on each school website now.
And where do you find it, Mark?
So I compiled the data from a bunch of different sources, but you know, the school nurses have been great with as they collect their data. You know, some of that data is coming from the state. You know, if you look here, the lines 7, 8, 9, 10, or 7, 8, and 9. That's actually coming from the state. You know, some of this is our own internal data, but you know, it's a compilation from a number of different sources, and the reason that we're going Wednesday to Wednesday is you know, it gives an opportunity to have some nice clean breaks, get that data compiled, have it as close to live time as I can to bring to the board, but we are also putting this data out on the websites.
So when you say dashboard, is there a button on the website?
So I believe it's a different page.
Perfect, thank you. Just want people to be able to find it, that's all, because I can never find a lot of things. All right.
Okay, Jen, then Sean.
When we are communicating to parents about potential exposures, and those letters go home to parents, the word potential exposure, does that mean that your student was potentially exposed, or, and I'm asking because I've seen 2 of these letters, I've received one of them myself, but it's a little confusing about potential exposure, because it sounds like somebody your child was around may have been exposed to somebody who may be positive.
So in each of these cases, it's a case where we have learned that a student has been exposed and then has unknowingly, like they find out, you know, maybe a day or 2 later that they were themselves exposed and they had been interacting with other Timberlane students. So the potential is, yes, the Timberlane, the families that are getting those letters are really 2 or potentially 3 people removed from the positive case.
And so those students are then being, kind of be careful here. It just seems like we're shutting things down for things that are 2 or 3 people removed.
So we are trying to, you know, to make decisions in as live a time as we can. You know, oftentimes we just simply get told that so-and-so has been exposed or so-and-so has it. And we have to react as quickly as we can to protect the greater good of the Timberlane community and all students involved. So as we might send out information that says your student, your child, has potentially been exposed. And then we spend some time looking and trying to get that level of detail and data on what did that exposure look like? Was it 6 foot or closer than 6 foot? You know, how did that exposure take place? then we'll follow up with those families that need that. But we feel as though it's important to at least let families know that there was that potential exposure.
But when you're saying potential, so you're using potential in two different ways there. And I think that's the part that's confusing. When you say that it could be that a student you know has tested positive and others have been exposed to that student, you're calling that a potential exposure, which in fact that's not. That is a true exposure.
Well, but if I may, that as in the initial reaction, it is a potential because we might not know exactly how those students interacted. So for example, if you have a group of students, athletes, students, whatever, and we learn of a positive case, and now, you know, that positive case is associated with those students. Right now, it's a potential exposure. As we get more level of detail, we might learn that student only interacted with a small subset of that student group. And so the initial reaction is everyone had potential. As we learn more information and we do contact tracing with the nurses, with DHHS, and we get more information from the parties, we might say, okay, these students actually never interacted. But we feel it's appropriate to at least let families know that there is that potential for exposure.
Dr. Cochran wants to chime in here.
Just wanted to say, having been through this exercise multiple times, often late in the evening, after a long week and a long day, the greatest difficulty that we have is with limited information, being able to determine whether or not a particular student or students meet the criteria for close contact. So what we end up is in a situation where we have information that was an exposure, and the next thing we have to try and determine is, can we determine which of those students, if any, or adults, met the criteria for this, and if not, how do we let parents know that there has been some sort of exposure, knowing that we do not know whether or not close contact was maintained with any or all or some students. Because at the end of a practice, you could ask a coach at a volleyball practice or a soccer practice or whatever, and a coach may be cognizant of that because we've actually been asking the coaches and to start thinking about distancing during the game. So we're hoping that people will have that and be able to say at no point in time in our soccer practice, we're students spending 10 or more minutes in the same 6-foot space with another student. So that's a goal, it's still a goal that we're trying to work towards. But the reality is we often get information late. We don't have access to the people who can give us the information. And so we're reacting and trying to share what we know, but the reality is we don't know nearly as much as we would like, often until the next day. And so we're erring on the side of communicating and letting people know, even though we can't give the level of specificity that we would love to provide. And believe me, that's not a good feeling when you have to sign off on a letter that's going to 30 parents to say, we really don't know what happened here, but we are working on this as fast as we can and trying to advise you, and we're erring on the side of caution as we think is needed. So far, we don't believe we've had any spread within the school from our sports issues, which I think is a wonderful thing. It's all been from the community in and no spread. We may not be so lucky in the future, but I think working the kinks out really comes down to that piece. What information, and this sounds like a law class, what do we know and when did we know it? And when can we share something with a degree of confidence that we can give that level of specificity? Because we would love to give that level of specificity, but we don't want to over-report and pretend to know more than we do.
Have we shut down any classrooms because of exposure?
I guess I don't understand the question. What do you mean by
Have we
shut down a classroom?
Have we quarantined any classes because of potential exposure?
So, I mean, I'd like to refrain from getting too much into the details because, I do feel as though it's important to protect privacy. But yes, there has been a classroom that has been, students in that classroom have been quarantined.
Because of exposure in the classroom?
Because of a exposure to a positive case.
And out of how many classrooms that we have?
Off the top of my head, I do not know how many classrooms are in the district.
Ballpark.
So
I think there's
so
around 400.
My
based
question
on-
really is, I'm wondering how we are defining close contact if our classrooms are maintaining 6 feet.
So, I mean, that's a great question, and again, it comes down to what did we know and and what do we have to err on the side of caution? Ideally, you're absolutely right, that we can say that classrooms are at 6 feet. In this particular case, we didn't have confirmation that all students were maintaining that 6-foot distance. We could not get we could not get that information. So we erred on the side of caution and felt as though it was important and appropriate to ask these students to quarantine because we could not guarantee the 6 foot. In other classrooms, in other cases, we have been able to say, you don't need to quarantine because in this case, the 6-foot distancing and the masks and the time has been maintained. In this particular case, we could not guarantee that with the information that we had at the time.
And when you say you're asking them to quarantine, are you saying you're asking them to quarantine from school, or that you're reporting them to DHHS as having contact and asking them to quarantine by the state?
We are following the DHHS guidelines.
So I guess this is my frustration, and I'm sorry, but it's extremely frustrating, and I've lived through it, and I know other parents have dealt with this. But if you're not sure, and there's a question, it's like parents are being asked to trust without the ability to verify. And I understand there's only so much you can release. But when the state calls you and tells you, you must quarantine for 2 weeks, despite the fact that your child is negative, and tells you if you don't quarantine, you're breaking the law, and that they can come to your house and do a home visit, and you have, and this is based on a because we're not sure. I'm sorry, but I think we need to do a better job of who we're going to the state and saying, this one's had close contact, or all of these people maybe had close contact, but we don't really know, so you're all quarantined for 2 weeks.
If I may, we don't actually provide the name of the list of the students who are quarantining to the state. The state does their process with contact tracing. So what happens is the state learns of an individual who is testing positive. The state does their contact tracing through that individual, and that individual and that family might say, these are the people that I interacted with, and then the state does their contact tracing. We do not give the state any names of students that we feel as though, using the state guidelines, needs to be quarantined. So
we're only quarantining from our building, not the state.
So we are following the DHHS guidelines on their recommendation to quarantine, but we are not giving the state the names of the students who are quarantining. The state has the name of the student or person who is a positive case, and the state is doing their contact tracing separate from ours.
Okay, Sheila?
First of all, I want to say thank you. This is very valuable information for the public and for us. And I think this is fantastic. Second, I wouldn't want your job for anything. And this is why, because you have to make a judgment call at the time. It's what it comes down to. You have to be able to keep kids safe. This is why we haven't had a huge major breakout at Timberlane at this point, is that we're trying to contain it and keep kids safe. And staff, and our admin, everybody. So, you know, I understand Mrs. Silva's frustration, but on the other side of it, I guess I'm the exact opposite side as Ms. Silver, and I'd rather have them quarantined to be safe for everybody else that they might come in contact with, whether they have that or not, because it's a safety measure. It's a safety measure for everybody in these buildings. But that's exact opposite in my opinion on it. But again, would I want what you're doing? To try to figure out who's been with who's been 6 feet, who's, you know, you don't know if they slept over each other's house over the weekend. How would you know? It's doing the very best you can with the information that you have. So, that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Sean?
Yeah, if I can, Ms. Pedersen, I do agree this is a great graph. Thank you very much. If I could add a couple suggestions to add to this, would be what are the limits? As you can see here, we have all the criteria that are where we're going to make decisions based on these different metrics. If we could have right in there, like, just pick one of the items, at what percentage do we transition to a fully remote would be, what is that triggering limit? I know it's in our plan, but having it right up here, right next to the numbers, you can see, especially with having a history of what the previous week was, this week, hey, we're heading to that way, and maybe we can do some extrapolation easily to, figure out, hey, are we going to hit this in 2 weeks, most likely, because of the way the numbers are moving, or what? And then the other one I would ask is it has to be just basically a one entry point for 2 items. Is we have in here, we have the student absenteeism rate and the staff absenteeism rate. If we could get what the 2019 and 20 numbers were for the year, but not before COVID, because of course, the remote 1.0 really changed a lot of things, so I don't want that to distort it. But what I'm looking at is what is historically is the absenteeism rate of our students and our staff.
For that week?
Like a year ago this time, 2019 compared to now?
Yeah, but, and I'm like taking not a weekly average, but like say, what's the 6-month average from the beginning to, COVID time frame? Just so that we can say, what's a typical year? I mean, I would figure that those numbers, if you look at them a year prior to COVID, that they would be pretty much similar from year to year to year. And I wanted to see any kind of correlation now that we're doing something drastically different. Is there any kind of anomaly out of that?
Yeah, so that's actually it's a great suggestion. For a person who likes data, I'd love to do that. I'll find the time to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure that we can look at that as a correlate. As to your first suggestion, we actually do have. I did make a dashboard key. I took the sort of the what does it mean, if you will, out of the metrics that the governor released on September 1st that you all adopted as the new metrics, and I made it into a 1-page. I didn't get it into the board package.
No, that's fine.
But it is on the website. So
okay.
The website is sort of a twofold. It's the current weekly data plus the key that tells you what is like sort of that next point.
Okay.
Like when do you go from green to yellow to red,
Nice.
and then
Thank you.
So it is there, but I will include it in the executive summaries next time.
Okay, no, that's no problem then. If it's already there, consider it done then.
Barbara?
So we are thinking about going to 3-foot distancing with masks. Do you think that the quarantine rate is going to go up if that happens?
That is an excellent question, and I agree that it would go up. That's because at this point, we can, in some scenarios, we can sort of guarantee, if you will, that if we did have a positive case, that if we were following that 6-foot guidance from DHHS is saying that if you were closer than 6 feet for more than 10 total minutes, that person now needs to quarantine.
Even if they were wearing a mask?
Even if they're wearing a cloth mask. So that is the guidance from DHHS. So if we were to drop and go below 6-foot distancing in our classrooms or in any scenario, if there was a case, a positive case, and that person now interacted with a classroom, the likelihood and the percentage of kids now interacting at that close contact definition is going to significantly increase. And there's a very likely chance that the number of staff, students being asked to quarantine because of that DHHS sort of threshold is going to increase significantly. So although we might be able to initially get more kids back into the building, there's a very good chance that more kids are actually now going to have to quarantine because of just the nature of closer than 6 feet.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Looks like, no. All right. Moving on then, I think, unless there's, I'm not sure what the conference is down here. No? Okay. Wasn't sure having another. Moving on now to the audit. And so Mr. Dowd's going to come down. Board members, you should have the audit in your packet. I'm going to take a little liberty here and just steal your thunder, Mr. Dowd. There are a couple things in the audit that need to be addressed. The first, this trust fund reimbursement, if you have the audit on page 2, the second paragraph from the bottom. This is quite concerning to me. It appears that the Danville kitchen was done in 2013 and that money should have come out of the trust that is held for the school for capital projects, and that it did not. So I think we need to contact the Plastow trustee of trust funds and see what can be done about this now.
That's correct, yeah, and that predates my time in the position, and with the change in trustees as well, from Danville to Plastow, it added a little bit of a complicating factor, because that also predates the Plastow trustees' time.
I know, but they hold that trust fund now, so
They do.
it's in their court. How much is in the trust fund now? We pulled out about 700,000. Didn't we have about 1.2? So I think there's probably about $500,000 in there. Sorry, answered my own question.
Feel free.
So we should have enough money, but I think now you're going to run into a problem where it's not the right fiscal year and how you're going to do the MS9. But Plastow's,
Oh, yeah, that could be a problem on the reporting end for the trust fund, yeah.
yeah, so could you contact the Plastow trustee of trust funds and let them know? And you also need to have a discussion with them about the fact that we have scholarships coming out of Timberlane High School, and they should be coming out of the trust funds. They should be going into the trust with a trust document and then being paid out by the trustee of trust funds.
Correct, and that was one exception this year in the audit year, with the transfer from the Danville trustee to the Plastow trustee. We had to have those books clean. We could not have anything pending during that time, so we wanted to make sure there were no checks outstanding. There were no amounts that were in limbo, if you will, in the middle. And those are usually around when those funds are paid out. So it makes it very difficult to have funds be put into the trust funds. They have to be in, they have to clear, be recorded, and then the Plastow trustee of the trust funds has to get those funds set up with a different fiduciary on their end and have the funds withdrawn in a very short time. It was a practical impossibility in this case, but that has been addressed as an issue in this year, and this audit year in particular, with the change in trustees, presented an exceptionally complicating factor with that, because we did not have the continuity. And we just couldn't have anything outstanding. They had to have a clean transition between the two trustees.
So you're saying that you took money out of the student activity funds because there was an issue as the trusts were transferring from Danville to Plastow?
These relate to funds that come in on an annual basis. So if someone funds a small scholarship every year, they might fund that every year. And those funds had been previously to this audit going through the school account at the high school. So the amount that comes in would go in and go out. And prior to this audit had said, try and put them through they should be going through the trust fund. They should come in, be received, go to the trustee of the trust fund, and then be distributed, even if it's a month after, 2 weeks after, whatever it is, have it come back out of there. So in this particular instance, we just didn't have the ability to have those funds deposited and withdrawn. They wouldn't have been available to pay out for several months, from what I can tell.
Okay.
So it's a small
Another
one.
area as an action item, either in 2 weeks or a month, I would like to know what transpired on this issue with the Danville money that didn't come out of the trust fund that should have.
Sure.
The next thing that I want to see addressed on this is the school lunch balances. We had this discussion, for those that are new to the board, 2 or 3 years ago. We started to look at outstanding fund balances, so maybe in the next 2 weeks to a month, we can get an update on that, because they pointed out that you have people with upwards of $1,000 in outstanding lunch balances.
Yeah, there are a couple, yeah.
What is our current outstanding balance on lunches?
I don't have that at my disposal. at the
So
moment.
let's take that as an action item. And then the third action item is I'd like to have a summary as to how we're going to take care of these student activity funds that we, across the board, seems to be some issues, which was kind of surprising because I guess I had seen this in previous audits. The good thing is I don't see any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in this one, which is the first one in a couple of years. So thank you for that. So now I'm done with the audit. I'll move to other questions. Barbara?
So one of the concerns is under difficulties encountered during the audit, they said they could not get their fieldwork scheduled between November and June 2020, November 2019 and June 2020. And I'm just wondering if we're going to be able to schedule the fieldwork for the 2020 audit in a timely manner this year.
Yes. Yep, I don't see that as the.
Do you know when we expect it'll be finished?
I would expect it to be, I don't know when it'll be finished. I anticipate that they would be in probably later on in the budget process, end of November, December, I would say.
Okay, so we anticipate no issue with letting them in to do their fieldwork. Thank you.
And bear in mind, it's not them coming in, it's a block of time. And where it was just, really me in that position, I now have an additional support, which is exceptionally helpful. But when it's just me, Maria, she's great, so, but I've got to, if it's just me, I've got to have a block of time, a significant block of time that is available just for that purpose.
Okay, so now we can do parallel processing.
That's exactly it.
Awesome.
That's exactly right. That's really a big component of being able to have the audit team here and be able to address the normal, everyday, day-to-day things that come up.
Okay, so things have changed and now we expect it to be on time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the audit? If not, I will seek a motion to accept the 2019 audit.
So made.
Second.
Sean makes a motion, Lee seconds, all in favor? 8-0. Where am I? Okay, 21-22 budget. In your packet, you have, I think the first thing, mine's way out of order now. Was it, let's start with the, okay, that's first. Okay, this is the overall budget first. I don't, Mr. Dowd, you can just stay there. I don't think there's anything really significantly different in here. One of the things that we do need to look at is the SAU budget comparison, which is right behind the actual budget itself. The board in developing the withdrawal plan, did Barbara?
Just a comment on the operating budget that's been proposed. It says it's a $3 million, almost a $3 million increase. But the thing to note is a large chunk of that is the state pushing the cost of teachers' retirements onto our district.
Correct. So for those in the public, that New Hampshire has increased our contributions to entire retirement rates for employees from 11.17% to 14.06%. For teachers, 17.8% to 21.02%. And this represents
over $1 million.
Over $1 million of an increase. And as board members are probably aware, the TTA contract runs us close to $1 million. So there's $1 million in retirement, there's $1 million in teacher increased salaries, and then there's another $1 million. So it's pretty easy to see where this $3 million increase is coming from.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if we could have, Jeff, if you could add into where your notes are, little one. I know you do a great job of explaining the percentage increase, but maybe put another line underneath there that's actually illustrating this dollar amount, because even though they do go on up, if that sum 100,000 is much different than if it sums to $1 million. So, to illustrate where these funds are going.
I can do that, Sean. What I have to do is take the amount of the budget for salaries just for the current year budget and run the new rates against it to get a true comparison. So if you look at those two lines, the total is over 1.3 million, but some of that is just based on natural salary growth, you know, contracts go up and all that. So if you want to see a one-to-one, I can put that in as a pure number, pure increase.
Okay.
If it'd be helpful. And the number is found, I think, on the second to last page of the audit under 2,900.
Right.
Non-teacher and teacher retirement, I believe, and it's showing an increase in those two lines with salary growth of 323,000 and 1.138, but some of that's just based on salary growth.
Okay, so back to the budget, and what we have to deal with this year is the incorporation of the SAU 55 costs into the Timberlane budget. We also need to think about staffing, which the board has discussed both as a withdrawal plan and as the board. So this one-page document that's after the budget looks at Timberlane's portion of the SAU budget for FY21, which is our current year, which is about $1.7 million. Looking at our new SAU staffing plan, we're looking at about $1.5 million. So we're actually roughly, and we shouldn't look at this as a total savings because this is the SAU, but we're also reorganizing within the district. There's about a $255,000 delta in favorable towards Timberlane as we transition. One of the questions that has come up, and I have emailed council about this, is what number is going to go into the default budget? I want to be proactive on this. I don't want to get into a problem where we have somebody filing a lawsuit because they think we should have put 1.7 into the default budget for a number as opposed to 1.5. So
Not
it's
happen either way.
well, we're seeking council's advice as to which number that we're going to use. But board members, we're looking to kind of solidify, I don't know as we really need a motion, but making sure you understand that these lines, which are going to parse into new lines in the new budget, right?
Correct.
They're going to be in the 23, 21, 25, 11. This is where the SAU budget, this is what the SAU budget staffing, whatever it looks like. And that's going to be built into the new budget into different lines.
Correct. And it's already, is in the budget, the bottom line budget that you're looking at right now.
Right, it's in the bottom line budget, but you don't see it as you
Standalone.
see it in more than one line now. It's dispersed over all these lines that Mr. Dowd is giving you. So I just want to make sure, and I want to let you know that we're seeking, it's clear to me that the SAU budget has to be in the default. We have to have an SAU. But
Right.
what's uncertain to me is what number is going to be carried.
Well, so are you waiting for a call back?
I'm
or-
waiting for counsel. I sent an email, Dr. Cochran's,
At this point, I'd ask them which way, legally, and which way do we not get sued?
well, that's,
You can't control what other people
you
choose
can't
to do.
control whether we're going to get sued, but I'm going to ask for the
Oh, it's
legal
bound to
opinion
happen
before we
anyways.
put the number into the budget. So,
I'm sorry, I missed what the last sentence you said?
excuse me?
You're going to put which number in the budget?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm asking council how we're going to proceed on the SAU in terms of the default budget.
Oh, yeah.
It's complicated.
Because you're thinking looking at this, what two numbers are you looking at?
Last year's
The 1.7?
Timberlane's contribution was 1.7, and so that would have, if we stayed in the SAU, that would have carried. But now we're talking about a new SAU, and we have some savings, so we're talking about 1.492. So to me, that should be the number that goes into the default budget. But I'm asking council, which is the correct number.
But last year, the voters didn't actually vote on anything because you can't vote on the SAU budget. You have to vote on that particular line within the overall budget.
And it's
Well,
pretty
the SAU
interesting-
budget was carried in as its own line. Yeah, I
Right.
know. So I don't know. I just, it should
It's-
be an easy question, but I'd rather get the answer. Let council answer it.
It's pretty interesting because there's no actually SAU default budget.
Right. There
Whatever
used to
it's
be
got
at one
adopted
time.
as the operating budget moved over to the respected school district
Right.
and was the same number for both the default and the,
I know, so it's,
So along those lines, it would be the 1.4, not the 1.7.
Yeah.
So the contractual obligation to fund the SAU is gone, right? So that would drop out as a contractual obligation. You have the legal obligation. And that legal obligation is to provide SAU services, which the best estimate that we have right here is that 1.4. So we'll see what council has to say
yeah,
on it.
we're gonna see what council
Yep.
has to say.
Good
So
point,
that's,
Jeff.
that's the discussion.
It's a good
on
point,
the
yeah,
budget.
the contractual obligation is gone, but
It's gone.
yeah.
Yeah. And positions that are added to the budget don't get necessarily added to the default, so, but again, it's required by law. So then what number is it? So we'll get some clarification. There's nothing on point as is the case with our default statute, so.
Okay, so moving on, still talking about budget then, I was hoping to have a draft of what the CIP committee meant, I don't know, last week. There are two things that came out of the CIP committee. One, the current operating budget has approximately $1 million in it for capital improvement projects. There are only about,
None of that's been touched.
there's only about $250,000 of that we have earmarked for capital improvement this year in the CIP. And unfortunately, I'm just having to speak to this because we don't have that document here. So that leaves about roughly $750,000 right now that we could spend in the current operating budget for capital improvement projects.
Okay.
We did at our last meeting, we got a list of HVAC systems and age, and part of the reason that we're looking at all the HVAC systems now is to figure out which of those that we should be potentially looking to replace in this current fiscal year. Another item that we need to consider in this current fiscal year, and I asked our consultant, Steve Martin, about it, our financial consultant, I would anticipate, based on his recommendation, that when we move out of SAU 55 and we transition our into the new SAU, that we will be looking at a different financial package. And I would expect that could be anywhere between $80,000 and $100,000 if we move to a new financial package. That would be up to the incoming business administrator. But I think that's something that we need to plan for, like mentally, that there's about $100,000. For those that think this is an SAU withdrawal expense, it is not. But if you're gonna move and you have a financial software system that it makes sense to move to because it's more robust and will give us better capabilities and will save personnel time, this is the time to do it as you're moving into a new SAU. So that's the plan there. So when we think about the fact that we have maybe $750,000 to spend on capital, I'd mentally like to subtract off 100 for software and then think about around 600. And that, I think, based on what the CIP committee looked at, should essentially be HVAC systems.
And
Is
maybe a
software
roof.
considered capital?
So, software, that would be a one-time expense because it would be, there would be a yearly expense associated with it, but that would be like a one-time, this is now your software pay. It's like, you know, if you buy, I don't know, a software program or some of the programs that I buy, and then every year I have to spend a little bit more to upgrade it to the latest system.
So there's the initial cost and then there's the maintenance.
Yeah, exactly. So to me, that's a capital cost, the initial cost.
or unless they get a package of software as a service and then they're just paying a yearly fee for it.
Well, again, I just think it's something that we need to keep in the back of our minds.
I would agree. It's easier to give back the $100,000 that you haven't spent than.
Right, than to try to find it, especially with what's going on with the budget. So another action item in 2 weeks, we need a list of capital projects for this current fiscal year with a focus on HVAC systems.
And didn't we also say roofs, maybe?
Oh, yes, thank you, Barbara. There are 2 roofs that are in desperate need of repair. One's in Danville, one's in Sandown. That's approximately 150. So right there's 150 out of that, say 650.
150 total?
Yeah, 150 total, approximately. I don't have it in front of me.
No, that's
Brian, do you remember that?
We are
Was it
working on getting,
150 for those 2 roofs?
we're working on getting more accurate, our estimates, right?
Right, I'm just ballparking numbers because I don't
Okay.
have any paperwork.
This is the discussion, I think, for tonight, because we don't have those final numbers. We're still waiting to also identify what, we can look at them on age, but really it's going to be an age and performance issue, and we may have some units that would, HVAC units that may be required to be replaced sooner based on performance. And so those are what we're looking to put on that priority list. One of the reasons that we don't have a list, the CIP committee is still going through, it's still in draft form, but the ideas are out there. We discussed these, and these are the things that I think the board, and Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, the board should be looking at as we approach the next school board meeting. Trying to move those things forward. So I think the CIP committee should be done next week. We should have a final report next week for the board.
We have a CIP committee meeting next week, right, Brian?
Correct. That was, but you're right, Jeff. That was, I believe Jeff's right, that we weren't supposed to be talking about those projects tonight. I think it was after the next CIP meeting.
I think that this is a great forum to introduce the ideas and give you
time to think about them. But we needed some numbers. I think we were supposed to get some numbers back.
Yeah, and we'll be able to commemorate those numbers at the Wednesday CIP committee meeting, and then they'll be ready for the next board meeting to take some action. But putting it out there, getting the ideas out now, I think is helpful.
Right.
For the roof aspects, are they looking to be addressed like immediately so that we're going to have new roofs on these buildings prior to the winter setting in?
Well, we have the money. I don't see why there's any reason to not move forward with those two roofs. Those two roofs, according to Mr. Paradis, I don't know if he's here, really desperately need to be done. So
Now, one of them's coming off every storm, so.
You don't need a motion from the board. There's money in the capital. The consensus of the board is to move forward with the roofs.
Perfect.
So let's, good point, Sean. Let's get those
Do we
done
need
ASAP.
a motion for that, or that's already decided?
I mean, the money's in the, I don't think we need a motion. Everybody's come to.
You know what, how about we just make the motion to make it clean and we authorize the superintendent to bless it?
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to put new roofs in Danville and Sandown as noted in the CIP, because I don't know the numbers off my head.
So moved.
Sheila makes the motion. Barbara seconds.
Discussion. I think you might be jumping the gun for 2 weeks here. Because we have no idea what the number is.
I was just going to say, I'm not comfortable voting on that without a number, I guess.
Well, what if we caveat it with the discretion of the superintendent? That way, I mean, if they come back and they say they're $2 million, of course we're not going to do it. But if it's reasonable and sane,
When
then...
we cap it at 200,000,
I don't understand the purpose of the vote.
Just wait.
I think the point is that once those quotes come in, it should never be up to this board to be the gatekeeper, even though we are the gatekeeper, but we got to wait till the next meeting to authorize this, and that's what I think we're trying to
We're
overcome.
expediting.
Because winter's not going to change on us.
It won't wait for us?
No, it won't.
Dang.
Last time I checked.
So the next meeting is November 5th.
yeah, we don't meet till November 5th.
So that's 3 weeks.
I don't know.
I think, Dr. Cochran, you've got the CIP there, right?
I'm sorry, did you say something?
You're giving it to me?
That's your version of the CIP.
That's my version of the CIP? Did I make a, oh, I see, that was the one that I emailed you.
If one is coming up, that's concern, depending on where it is.
Well, my concern is that
I get what you're saying.
if we delay too long, I mean, we've had snow for Halloween around here before, so.
Snow this weekend.
Is it really?
We're down too far. Never mind.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Oh, a lot of work.
Please, please.
Good thing you're out front, Lee.
She's trying to throw stuff at me. She's crumbling papers.
I guess my motorcycle ride this weekend's gone.
Yeah.
You got to go out to bed. This is.
I was going to ask you about that. Did you?
Jeff,
Had
this
to put
is
it
the
different something.
definition of insanity.
It was nice.
No, the name tag.
What's the matter?
I was teasing her. She had to put her name tag out.
We know who you are and we know where you live. You can't run and hide.
All right, well, I'm going to make a comment on the budget once you look at that. So, looking at the budget, Jeff,
We're looking at the CIP was 45,000 to replace the asphalt roof in Danville. This is only one section of Danville.
It's not a huge port, it's not a
It's
huge
not,
portion.
and
no.
then, Sandown North was 98,000. So I think, I understand people's points, but I don't think we want to wait another 3 weeks, because then you've got to go, I mean, if somebody wants to make the motion up to 200,000.
Do we already have a motion and a second?
Excuse me?
Do we already have a motion and a second?
Yes, we do.
We did, if somebody wants to withdraw and then make a new motion. Who made the motion and seconded?
Sheila, and then I seconded. So I can withdraw my second.
I will withdraw my motion, but I'm making a new motion. Making a motion to expend no more than $200,000 on 2 roofs, one in Danville, one in Sandown North,
From the current operating budget.
out of the current operating budget.
Second.
This all goes out to bid and all this stuff. That was it?
Oh,
What'd you
yes.
say?
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah, it's going
You-
out to
following the
bid.
usual
We're just-
process,
We're
yes.
just
Yeah.
giving them the authority to start getting this rolling.
Rather than wait 3 weeks.
Right. All in favor? 8-0?
This is a very typically out of process, but it's important for the board to remember that you only have the room to do this because you were able to address some items that were on this year's CIP list out of
Right.
last year's budget. So this is what we can do. We can move things up like this. And
We're making progress every day.
Okay, so still on budget, the next thing we're looking at is COVID-related expenses. There's another sheet here, which I thank Mr. Dodd putting this together.
I had the big one when I read this afternoon.
What, you had what? Oh,
We get a
so,
plan.
you know, right now we're looking at, well, you took a,
Well, actually, it goes in.
well, it's actually kind of difficult to, off the top, to say what the, because you subtracted off unfilled positions, but the pandemic floaters could be costing us upward of $800,000.
I think that's on the higher end, yeah.
Yeah, no, so looking at the COVID-related expenses and then balancing that against some of the CARES funding, First Student, it looks like, has given us some sort of a break on busing because we're only using buses 4 days a week, right?
That's part of it, and the other part was that ESY was remote. A lot of it was remote this summer.
Oh.
And as a result of that, we were able to reduce that line.
And then we have up 10 unfilled positions. So this is just giving us some idea of where we stand in terms of unexpected expenses.
Well, the biggie is the pandemic floaters and technology, obviously.
Can I ask a question about the, those 10 unfilled positions? Are those positions that we are looking to fill this year, or are they positions that will remain unfilled for this year?
I think the answer is that they were selected generally as a practical matter. It did not seem like we're very short all around, and it seemed like we would not be filling those just based on the reality of the situation.
So the impact on the budget really is the difference between those two from the staffing line perspective.
Correct.
So not too bad.
Right. So I just feel this was important to have because we kind of need to see what this COVID expenses are doing to our budget. There was something from the New Hampshire School Board Association that came out, Dr. Cochran, I sent it to you, that was like a last call for COVID money or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
Did
I
you-
forwarded to Mr. Dodd.
Yeah, and I think we'd even discussed the fact that the grant situation is quite fluid at the moment, and we had, I think, another opportunity as well, not COVID-related, to recover some previous costs, but I did not include anything that was an unknown offset, but it's entirely possible there'll be some offsets, additional offsets. I would expect additional offsets in here.
Right, but did we submit the data that we needed to based on that?
I believe we're pooling it. Was that the opioid data? We had 2 sets. One was for the opioid data.
Oh, yeah, actually, yeah, let's talk about that after we talk.
Right.
The other data, that there was, the state was still looking to disperse money.
Mhm.
Did we send that data forward? This
I'll-
was like the last dispersal?
I will check and see what went through, because we have a couple different programs, but I want to make sure I have the right one.
Okay.
It's
All
very
right.
fluid, unfortunately.
Yeah, and before I forget, there was, council sent forward, as you know, we're in a class action lawsuit with many other districts regarding trying to get some money back because of the expenses that schools have incurred because of the opioid crisis, things like extra counselors, extra law enforcement sorts of people. So there was a request from council for data related to that Mr. Dowd and Dr. Cochran are filling out. So that lawsuit is moving forward. Jen?
I don't want to take up too much time, but I forget that we don't have a screen here
I
for
know.
public to see, but just so people are aware, pandemic floaters, that total was $838,888. And then the 10 unfilled positions that we're talking about was $612,031. The difference between the two of those was about $227,000. And then the CARES Act funding was $124,000, and the busing was about $174,000.
Savings.
Savings, yeah.
I think you're my screen sharing tonight. I don't have the screen share, so I can't.
Right,
Thank
well,
you.
I feel that we're talking about it and the public's like hearing it without.
Yeah.
I know, it's
So,
sometimes
and
it's
then
a little
the
easier.
bottom line is continuing with Jen's thought, after we get a $465,000 reimbursement from our healthcare system, the total is, we're about $300,000 more, the $300,000 overall that
Right.
we've spent for COVID-related expenses, net.
Sheila?
Going through this, though, you're estimating the return at 465?
Correct.
When will you know exactly what that number is?
So we know what the number is, and
The exact number?
yeah, I have the exact number to the district. The only issue is that the district will receive $516,850.
Okay.
Of that portion, as we contribute and employees contribute, the portion of that which is attributable to the employees would be returned to the employees, and that which was paid by, which was created by payments that the district made, would be returned to the district. So I anticipate.
So you're saying you're pretty sure it's going to be about 465?
Correct, yeah, on
Okay.
the conservative end. Yeah.
So now we need to make a decision on what we're going to do with this money.
Right, but we're moving on, we haven't gotten to that point in the agenda.
Well, I just figured we'd
Yeah.
piggyback.
Well, we're kind of lumping everything together, yeah. So it looks like we should use that money into the current operating budget, so.
Which means we have to set up a public hearing at our next meeting.
Do we have to do a public
Yes.
hearing for this?
Yep.
Yes.
To accept that money?
Yeah, if we intend
Yes?
to, if we
Okay,
intend,
well,
if we
then
intend
we
to
Put
can't,
it in the budget.
be able to spend it, yeah.
so we can't take action on that tonight then?
Well, the only action I was looking for is, do you want me to use it to offset taxes, or do you want me to contemplate it for offsetting current year expenses? And if you're
Okay,
offsetting
so-
current year expenses, let's wait for the public hearing,
Okay,
you know.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right,
so we'll.
then we need
let's-
to schedule a
we'll-
public hearing to.
We'll
Yeah.
make that motion here in a second. I just want to get through this other budget development stuff.
And should I just say, this is a very nice one-pager on the expenses that was well organized, thank you.
Okay.
Kim? Kim?
Sean?
Yeah, Jeff, do we have an idea of like, of the grants that you've applied for? Like, you know, what dollar amount is that? I mean.
I'm only looking at the shore amounts. We have grants, for example, or aid that we're getting. So we know that the CARES Act funding is there. We know that there has been some discussion that Homeland Security was going to be funding some PPE. They backed out of that. The state is coming in and saying, no, we think we can pick up some of the excess and extra on that. That's in, I don't know what, that's one of those things, and until the grant's been approved and the money's coming in, I'd feel comfortable including it on here. I do think that we're going to have more funding coming in. It's very fluid, though, the different programs we're getting into. I didn't include, for example, on here either, the amounts that we're receiving for food service, which has obviously been extended through December 31st, and I believe that there are some options for it to be extended through the end of year, through the end of June, the end of this fiscal year, this school year. So I haven't included that, and so there are slight enhancements here and there, but nothing remarkable.
I definitely support, you're being very conservative and focusing on, this is, money that we're guaranteed now. But I'd also like to know, like, what kind of funds the potentials are in flux.
Mhm.
And I know, and put the caveat on there, is that this could be zero, or the full amount, or somewhere in between.
Yep.
I think if we define it and present it appropriately, we should all be aware that, yeah, we have this potential to get this, but subject to it, why
Sure.
not get it?
I hate to get hopes up, especially with what's happened with
No, but it's
Homeland
reality.
Security. Yeah, as long as you know.
Okay.
Thank you.
So on the same line, the other thing that you have in terms of budget development, one is the October 1st, 2020 enrollment report. I did ask Mrs. Allaire, I was hoping to get it in the packet, what last year's enrollment was compared to this. I have the numbers, but I don't have it. So this year, our total enrollment is 3272. Last year it was 3490. So we're down about 118 students. So in the elementary, we're down, when I added it up, about 128, which means we're up a little bit in the middle and the high school, if I did this correctly. But we're down about 118 students from last year.
100, I'm sorry, 100.
118. Last year's October 1 number was 3490.
Oh,
A
that's
significant,
3451.
Oh, is that last year's October 1?
October 1, 2019.
Oh, okay, well,
There's actually a part of there, Kim, that the state does is revise the
Yeah,
October
Sandy
1st
might-
number is probably a snapshot, and then when they do a revised one, so that number that Jen is referring to probably was updated to reflect the 3490 number that you just iterated.
Yeah, Dr. Fair, just to clarify, the numbers I sent you were what were presented to the board for the tentative October 1 numbers a year ago, October 3rd, 2019. So those were the preliminary numbers prior to the DOE sorting through all of it and verifying. So they may have been adjusted, to Mr. O'Neill's point. So I looked up the board packet a year ago and sent you what was in there at that time a year ago.
but Jen has the one from a year ago, so
And it's different?
it's different.
Oh, that's interesting. So I
Yeah,
pulled it right off of the district
well,
website, so.
Okay, well,
yeah.
We'll go with one from a year
Okay,
ago. So it
yep.
was 3451, so it's actually not that,
Not as bad as we thought.
it's 199 down from last year. Okay, so you have 3451. So just if board members want to know that, it's,
just an FYI, if you wanted some comparisons, over the last 10 years, the state is averaging about 1% drop across the state, with fairly uneven. This drop is impacted significantly by the number of students who have gone to homeschooling.
Right.
And I would expect the number to come back for next year, but it will impact our ADM in terms of
I
funding
know,
for
and
next
that's,
year.
so that'll, what is it, 2 years back, that we're gonna see this
I don't think it'll
reflected 2
impact
years?
this year. I think it'll
Anyway,
impact it next year because the look back is 2 years.
the look back is 2 years, yeah. So,
I did have a question though on the enrollment. Just, we got a preliminary report August 19th, 2020.
okay,
And then we have this one from October 1st. And it looks like these October 1 numbers are down significantly from the August, I guess, was August actual enrollment, or were they predictions of what we thought we'd have? And this drop in numbers, I'm wondering, especially at the high school, I mean, are we looking at, and I know it's hard because of the climate that we're in, but are we looking at the high school student dropout rate increasing this year?
No, not to my, that's not my belief.
Okay.
I can't say that with certainty. I don't have that information in front of me. But to your question about the August 19th summary, that was pulled directly from Power School based on the registrations at the time at each school. So registration at that time of year is still in flux.
Yeah.
So we still have families who may have moved out of district throughout the summer months, have not unenrolled their children at that time, families coming in. So there still is quite a bit of flux to those August numbers, which is why we come back in October. But those were directly pulled from Power School.
Because grades 1 through 12, and I didn't look at pre-K and K because I couldn't decipher that. half-time, full-time, all of that, but grades 1 through 12 was a difference of 100, we had 170 students, a drop from August to October.
So Mrs. Kanotis just shared with me, we currently have 75 students who are being homeschooled.
Elementary?
Elementary level.
Oh, 75 at just elementary?
Just elementary. So if that helps to put that into context.
Yeah, no, it does. I
Yep.
don't blame them, yeah.
Yep.
Kim?
Sean?
Yeah, just to expand on one of the comments that Jen had made in regards to the two-year look back for ADM, that is only utilized district-to-district allocations, you know, for the assignment per pupil. That's the two-year look-back period. The state, when they are awarding funds, will be this year's numbers. So they're two different numbers that are used in the budgeting process. So that means is we're going to be getting considerably less revenue from the state
For this year?
this year,
Okay.
because they're going to use the current number, the 3272.
What is our revenue per student from the state? I think it's between 5,000 and 7,000, isn't it not? I thought I just read that in Barbara's summary, something.
Well, that's after you add in special education and various other things. But the base rate, I think, is under 3,000?
So no, it's like 3,400 bucks.
3,400 per student.
3,400 per student, okay, so.
But don't we have, going back to my nifty thing that I pulled out of my sleeve last time, don't we have another $1 million coming in from the state 2021? Oh, yeah. I didn't forget that.
That's factored
Wait a
in.
minute, you
It's,
pulled $1 million out of your back pocket?
I did.
She's showing
Can
off.
I have one
because
too?
I'm showing off again.
Well, she's not showing off because I think there was an adjustment in adequacy aid, and I think Sandown was one of the bigger.
Sandown and Danville were getting
Right.
the adjustments. Has that money come in, or do we know when that money comes in?
Well, that comes in periodically throughout the year, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's that million, but that kind of offsets what we lost on the building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what's going on in my head.
Yeah, so, we're, I think
For
we're,
this year anyways,
Yeah.
it will offset that
Yeah.
building we lost.
all right. So the only other thing on the budget development, well, sorry, two other things. One, I have a note here, private tuition costs. I'm not sure, I don't see any documentation, so why is that? Was there something we wanted to discuss about that?
I'll defer to Dr. Cochran. I'm not sure if Ms. Kishka may have had a question on that. I'm not sure where that came from.
Okay, I'm not sure what that, it's in the deep agenda, and I'm not sure what that means, so let's just skip it. The other thing that's in here, because I think it's going to Budget Committee, is the school board expenses. Does the board usually vote on this budget? I don't remember, are we just reviewing it?
Yeah, as a courtesy, I'd like you to review it. This will be what is going to the Budget Committee as well. Obviously, they'll be looking at the SAU expenses as well, so. if you
All
have any
right, so they're gonna
comments
look at the SAU and the school board budget. One of the big numbers that we see in the school board budget is the huge legal expense line here, where we overspent by $158,000. That's in addition to the expenses coming out of the SAU budget, which now we need to factor into our, I would think, the school board budget. The SAU legal line really is gonna be into the Timberlane legal line,
It's only
right?
one legal line, yeah.
So, Mr. Dowd took that out of the SAU budget, it was about 65,000, that's not that number. Timberlane's portion of legal services in the SAU budget was 62,000. Given the fact that we are now trying to bargain with 4 different bargaining units, COVID has driven up a lot of, or caused us to need to seek legal counsel quite frequently right now. Just personnel and other things. The school legal fee line sits at 90,000. I hate to say this, but I think we should push it up to at least 150. I don't think we're gonna have the extraordinary expense that we had with some of our, the SAU legal line, obviously. I think that big legal expense is going away. But I still think we're gonna have a large legal expense because of all the bargaining units and personnel issues we're dealing with.
But that'll be done,
What?
that should be done, Kim, before 21, 22.
Oh, you think that, well,
All of them?
Well, I would certainly hope so, that
okay,
that gets you
you're
to
right,
June
you're right,
30th.
Brian, I was thinking current year, you're right. So I'm fine, let's leave it as it is,
I
I'm
think
fine.
I think the 90 might be low, but I think the 150 is high. But
So what do you wanna do, 120? 120? Do I hear 120?
well, you-
Go ahead.
All right, let's go with 120.
All right.
120 it is.
120 it is. All right, you don't need a vote on that, right?
No, absolutely not. No, and if you're okay with all the other
Yeah.
expenditures.
Oh, you know.
I
Well,
do.
Share it with us, please. What is it?
The private tuition is when you guys were going over the budget. Last time, there was a $600,000 increase that Sheila wanted looked into.
It was special education.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so did we look into that? Why we had a $600,000 increase in special?
So that's proposed, and the budget that budget wouldn't be necessarily, I don't want to say finalized, but that budget we always review later on in the budget process anyway. So I think if there are some assumptions in that budget, right, in that line right now, in those budget projections or in the budget as it stands right now, I don't think special education is scheduled to go before the budget committee for another month, 2 meetings. So I think before that meeting, we would have a refresh on what that looks like. This data, it's a very early budget process, and that data tends to change dramatically from the beginning of the year until even November. So we'll take a look at it, but it'll be changing probably by then, hopefully going down, based on knowledge.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that's it on budget development. Moving on.
Kim, if you wouldn't mind, I just wanted to let you know that the GMR did come in at 4.9, and that is the rate that came in. I had budgeted 6.5, so
Right.
that's a reduction. That's final. That's good. Well, I should say it's good news, but a little bit better than I anticipated.
Right, so that budget
So
dropped
4.9?
by about 100,000. All right, so the next thing that we have to discuss is, and we've already discussed this, but we're gonna need an action. I think that the board is probably going to want to look at taking the $465,000 that was returned from the Health Trust Board of Directors and using it to offset current year expenses, as Sheila pointed out rightly. So we'll need a public hearing to do that if we decide that that's our motion. So the other option would be to use it to offset taxes. So does anybody have discussion or want to make a motion? The motion would be that we use the $465,000 to offset current year expenses, and then we'll notice it with a public hearing.
So
Sean?
moved.
Wait, Sean has a question.
I want to make a sort of a statement with this, is that the board can decide at any time during this year to invoke this public hearing. And what I'm trying to do is to prevent us going through all the exercise, all this stuff, and you got the 465 grand that we can spend and we don't use it because we have a surplus anyways. So this is just going to add to the surplus like it normally would anyways. I would only like to move this forward if we know that we're going to have expenses, like say, for example, we wanted to do some extra HVAC work. That would probably be something that I would look at, that we're going to use these funds to do above and beyond what we were normally planning on.
So, then my question is to Mr. Dowd. I think what you're saying, Sean, is you want to leave it in limbo until we decide if we need it or not.
Yeah, I mean, we would have the caveat, it wouldn't be immediately accessible, but we would have to go through the public hearing kind of process, and then that gets approved, then we could spend it. So if we have say a month and a half time frame, that can easily be accommodated.
Right, so essentially, can we just let it sit in our account?
That's the only answer that I need. Really, the answer is either we're going to look to spend it later on. Really, the answer that I need, at tonight's meeting is if this is something that we're looking to use to reduce tax bills this year, I still have an opportunity to work it into the current year revenue to reduce tax bills. Aside from that.
That would be the only caveat, yes.
That-
It's what year, the money would eventually just flow naturally back
Next year if you don't spend it.
next year, so it would be in the current budget that we're in. We're looking at applying for last year so that it comes immediately and you get the tax relief.
Right, and I'll be setting tax rates in a couple days here, so this will be the last time to do that.
Well, we wouldn't be able to do that
Not
because we wouldn't
tax
have a
rates,
public
I'm saying.
hearing to do that.
Sorry? No,
No,
I'm
you wouldn't need a public hearing to do that.
Oh,
no, because it would be an offset, it would just be additional local revenue that I would include in our revenue, so we wouldn't be taxed.
what about if we take half of it this year and half of it next year? Or, do it that way, where you get the best of both worlds. Spread out the love.
People are suffering now. There are people without jobs. We have enough in the capital to take care of the HVAC.
Yeah, but even if you give this back to offset taxes, 465,000
Divided by 4 times.
4 towns, you're talking $20, $30 a
Yeah,
month.
It's gotta touch
tax bill.
anything.
$20 a household, yeah.
Never mind the fact that as we start going into 4 days, are we gonna need more and more floaters?
And more PPE and more
Are we gonna be
cleaning.
needing more and more subs?
Mhm.
I mean,
Say leave it there.
That's what I think.
Because right now, we're close to, we're at about $800,000 in COVID expenses. So let's say easily, there could be another 200, say, we're at $1 million in COVID expenses for the year, so that would be an unanticipated expense of $1 million. Our surpluses have been running about roughly 2.5.
Sure.
So now we're down, right now we're running, we'd almost have a surplus of, say, 1.5. So I think if your surplus next year is gonna be less than the surplus this year. And so I would lean more towards putting it towards next year.
My
Because,
concern is we're only, this $800,000 that we're into is only for about 5 months, and we still have another 5 months of this school year to go.
absolutely.
is that 800,000 when, maybe that's right. Is 800,000 your projection, this is the pandemic floater number, is that the number for the whole academic year?
Yes.
That's the whole year.
Okay. No, but I'm looking at the total at the bottom, that total excluding health trust refund is about 800,000.
Yeah, that's what
Right.
I said.
That's the year though.
That's 800,000 for the year, but I'd add another
So far.
200,000 for, that's why I said $1 million. So what I'm
Right.
saying is there's like $1 million in expenses in this year's budget that we didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
So I kind of like Sean's idea about just leaving the health trust money to see whether or not we're just going to take it and push it back as unexpended funds rather than put it into the operating budget and then have to pull it out later. I understand what you're saying about splitting it, but right now, I would anticipate that the tax, like Lee said, it's not gonna make that big of an impact on somebody's taxes. And right now, it seems the tax base actually in some of these towns has been increased with the amount of building. I mean, you told me Danville put 150,000 towards impact fee, that's a huge number for Danville, which tells me there must have been a lot of houses going up, so.
That is correct.
We also don't know what's gonna happen with income,
Right,
so I think we're better off just holding it for right now.
Yeah.
And just waiting.
That's it.
yeah, we also
See
don't
how
know,
everything
so.
plays out.
But is there, Sean, you raised the issue of maybe we do half towards this year's tax rate. Does somebody want to make a motion to put some of this towards the current? No, okay, so let's move on then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is policy JIA. Lee, did you want to take this? Or Jen, I'm not sure who wants to take the
Yeah.
lead on this.
It was in front of Policy Committee this evening. It was to eliminate some confusion and duplicity between J, I, C, D. So it's here for first read. You'll see we've struck some of the contents in the first paragraph because it is clearly outlined in J, I, C, D.
Point of clarification though, is this first or second read? Because I thought first read of this was back in February. And it got sent back to policy committee.
I thought we did a first read, but then it went back to policy.
Correct. So this would be, I think it's back for, it would be a first read again, I think.
For Rev 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this should be a first read. We're going to take this as a first read. So does anybody want to make the motion to accept this as a first read? Kristen makes it. Is there a second? Barbara seconds. All in favor? 8-0. Next item on the agenda is superintendent's goals. You'll see behind here the goals that this is the policy from SAU 55. Since the SAU is, kind of dissolving this year, and we did not do goals, I think, personally what I think is that the board should take a look at these goals and approve them for the superintendent, and then I would notify Chairman Boyle of the SAU that these are the superintendent's goals for Timberlane, and let him make a decision how we're doing superintendent goals this year. So does anybody have any comments or questions on these goals?
Does this cover Hampstead?
No, these are Timberlane's goals.
Timberlane's,
Barbara,
okay.
I think typically what happened in the past was each board had their own goals. And then the superintendent would use those goals as the basis for his evaluation. So our board approves our goals, Hampstead approves their goals
Okay, thank
for the
you.
superintendent. I don't think we need to have any more meetings of the SAU. Though I don't know how we're going to do the superintendent evaluation for this year, which needs to be done by contract. So there needs to be a meeting.
Yeah, we gotta,
I think you guys are meeting just to balance out also.
There needs to be a meeting this year.
there has to be a meeting because, in essence, Hampstead has to propose a budget that, we should be abstaining, but to even hold the meeting, we all gotta be there. or at least-
No, that's not the
Their own
case,
budget.
actually. That already went through legal.
Wait, what was that?
We don't have to be there for the SAU 55 budget for next year because we're not legally SAU 55 for
Right.
this year.
No, but I think Sean's right.
They need a quorum.
Well, yeah.
No, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure, I'll have to look back in my emails. I think there might have been some discussion about that before, before Dr. Messler left the district.
I wouldn't recommend that we get some kind of release from them.
We will take a look. I'll have to go back and look at that, but I think there was council had already weighed in on this.
Their council?
Oh, I'm sure of that.
I'm sure
in
they,
writing,
I'm
please?
sure
I don't know.
someone of those legal bills.
Let me, I need to take a look. I don't remember. Sheila?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the superintendent's goals for Timberlane for 2021.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Approved 8-0. What's next? Superintendent search. Did we get the job description in the packet?
Yeah.
Yeah, right here.
Oh, good. Really?
No, I don't have that.
Policy CV?
That's a
No,
policy.
see,
Oh.
yeah,
There is no job description.
the actual job description.
Yeah,
It's not
no.
in the packet.
Dr. Cochran and Kristen and I worked on the job description. We'll have to send that out to the board. So go ahead. I'm going to let Kristen take the lead here.
So Sandra Allaire and I have been speaking and trying to figure out the direction that we're going to go in this with the superintendent search. We do have the job description, which, how do we want to handle it? Because we wanted to talk about that tonight to try to move towards posting this. So do we wait till November
Do we have a
This,
copy
or-
machine in here that we can make a
We
copy
have-
for the
do we have a
board?
copy machine?
Could we get copies for the board, somebody in here? Yeah, we need to get this approved tonight by the board. We've got other items, so, yeah, enough, yeah, yeah.
So I guess the key things that I want to talk to the board about tonight, Sarah and I are working on a committee, and we're working very hard to make it a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Why am I having a brain cramp?
Diverse.
Thank you. I don't want to say the other word I was just about to say. Very diverse group, including people from all the schools, all the communities, and everything that we can. So we're going to keep it small and manageable, but yet large enough to make sure we include everyone that we need to include. So we are going in that direction. When we get the job description back, I'd like everyone's input on it so we can move forward with the posting. Curious to know what everyone's idea is for the timeline for posting, where we're leaning towards and strongly leaning towards with everything that's happening, with looking to try to get the kids back in school on December 7th. What's going on, again, and like that mic is right in the way, I'm trying to see it. Is to get the job posting up with the idea to start screening through the applicants in December with first round of interviews in early January, second round of interviews including the board, the entire board, and then moving forward from there. Again, trying to keep the community in mind, keep everyone involved, waiting to see what we get for a candidate pool, and basically, am I missing anything? I mean, that's pretty much where we're going, right?
Do you have a target date for when we'd like to have somebody under contract?
We're end of February.
Okay.
Is what we're thinking. That's the target. So, like we said, if we can do the first round in January, again, not knowing what's going to happen, feast, famine, who knows with the current status, how many applicants we're going to get. So it's, will all depend and have some sort of a factor with that. Now, where we're going to post this job description, I know you haven't seen it yet, but Brian?
Make sure you look at that.
Thank you.
Sure.
One in Sarah's packet.
So, that's one back there.
Do you have a copy?
I have a copy of that.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, that was in the agenda packet.
Yep.
Just not the actual, the posting description. So, talking about posting it with the State Administration State Admin Association, Ed Jobs, NESDEC. Where else does everyone want to see what's posted? Any suggestions, Brian? That's
Those are the two school boards. The School Board Association, ISDEC, and Ed Jobs are the three, by far the three most used. There's really nobody else close.
Okay, so everyone's comfortable with that? No one's thinking there's somewhere else it has to be, right?
Indeed.
So we're not looking to hire anybody to help us through the search process?
No.
Okay.
The New Hampshire School Board Association will help us, questions, things of that nature for the first couple of, to get us to the first couple rounds of interviews, but no, we're not looking to hire anyone. We're looking to do it just with the committee that we pull together and then with this board.
So I couldn't hear a lot of that. Are we going to be doing a national search, or is this all New Hampshire?
I'm sorry, Barbara, I didn't hear you.
Are we going to be posting someplace where we could get candidates from across the U.S., or is it going to be New Hampshire?
Go ahead. Well, those job sites are national, right? Ed Jobs, is that a national site?
Ed Jobs is New Hampshire. NESDEC covers all of New England. I mean, I'd routinely get Connecticut and so on. You might, if you want to go national, AASA perhaps, the National Superintendents Organization. They do postings.
Well,
So
I would
add
do
that.
that.
We'll add that too then.
I mean, one of the things that you can do that we've done to save money is that we do national searches where I work, is we do the first round of interviews as a phone interview, and even local candidates are interviewed by phone. That way, you're not bringing in candidates at a large expense. So if you do see that your candidate pool has drawing national people, you might want to consider a first round of phone interviews.
Yeah.
So.
Sean?
One of my questions is, in the job description, you get to the part there, candidates must be New Hampshire certified or eligible as a superintendent and preferably with an earned doctoral degree. I would like to have a discussion relative to that kind of only verbiage in there. I would think at some kind of a CEO level that people that are MBA and business centric would be, you could make a case that they would be actually a better candidate for this position. So I wanted to get some people's thoughts on modifying maybe that part of our statement. It's like we're giving a lot of weight to doctoral candidates only. And if you're a very strong financial background and have been running organizations or other school districts or even colleges, because you've seen many MBA people running colleges, that might be something that we want to look at.
I don't think you can really do just an MBA. I mean, you have to be qualified to be certified as a college can do that. You can hire a CFO and make them your but I don't think you can do that in a public school system.
Right, you have to have a
What do you
certificate.
mean, you can't?
Well, it says preferably, it doesn't say has to.
And I did at first it said just doctorate. I did ask preferable for a doctorate because I don't necessarily think you've got to have somebody with a doctorate, though. It's
I think-
preferable.
So then the same would apply for the MBA then, right?
Say, well,
As long as they're as long as they have that,
certifiable.
yeah, that superintendent certification.
Or eligible for
Eligible for
Right.
it.
Would it be a fair statement that, say, somebody that was running a major university decided to, apply for this position and is very qualified, that they would be able to seek those credentials from the state, and their experience in running a educational system would be, something that I know I would like to consider.
It may depend, looking at you'd have to look at the specifics of the certification requirements.
Okay.
Lee?
The 2 points of feedback from me. One, I'd like us to call out some level of years of experience. We don't do that. And then in bullet point 1, if we could quantify, it says, ... leading a substantial sized district. I'd like to put some kind of qualifier around that. What size district? What's sizable is relative?
Oh, I thought we had the number of students somewhere.
We have our number of students.
Did you say comparable
There's
size?
3,000,
Lee?
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
So he's saying right here.
Like a comparable size district?
I'd be
I
fine with
didn't
that.
give you a copy? You didn't get it then?
This is just an ad, though, right? This isn't really a job description, this is an ad.
Yeah.
Right, it's an
Yeah.
ad.
It's an ad, yeah.
And we'll see what kind of pool we get.
Comparable.
Right, comparable size district. I do agree on, I'm not sure for this side of ad though, how you, 5 years of increasingly, I don't know what the term is.
Responsibility?
5 years of
I think we're,
leadership progression within, if you look at someone with the educational background.
well, I think it says in here though, that somebody with experience as superintendent or assistant superintendent. You want to say with X number of years experience?
If we're going to play it off of specific to those roles, yes. If we're going to play it to where Kim was going, it would be progressive leadership experience within X environment, educational environment.
I think, is the right term central office? with at least 5 years of managerial responsibility in a central office, is that the way it was? I'm not familiar with the terminology that's
I feel like if we're
used.
looking for somebody that has superintendent or assistant superintendent experience, they wouldn't have gotten there without
Central office.
progressive, you know, managerial.
I don't know about that.
Principals with no leadership experience need not apply.
Well, again, but wouldn't it be up to the, you're
that is
putting on an
progressive
ad, putting on an ad.
managerial
When people get together to rank the resumes,
That's what I was just gonna say.
that's how it's gonna,
They'll vet.
you'll do that internally.
We don't wanna limit it so much. I mean, we
Right.
start putting all
Exactly.
these restrictions in, we
People
might
will be like,
limit
"I'm
our,
not
really good candidate because they have 3 years as opposed to
Sure.
5.
Yeah.
So I'd rather leave that very open.
That's fine.
And
Fair.
as
See what we
Brian
get.
said, when we all get together to look at it, you know, we're gonna be able to figure out, is this somebody that maybe has qualifications over here that didn't have the experience, but we wanna bring them in and give them that opportunity to hear from them. So I don't wanna,
Well, I hear what you're saying, but when you leave it too broad, what happens is you get recruitment fatigue.
well, and I
You're
agree,
gonna get-
I
you're
agree
gonna
with
get-
that, but I don't really,
You know, a stack of resumes and everyone's gonna start to look the same, and then you are gonna miss that good candidate.
but I think being able to look at right off the bat and see experience is something we can, you know what I mean, we can target right away by pile A, B, and C, like, you know, and then go through them that way. So we would have an idea as to who has what experience, but,
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
in favor of
think-
the wide net.
excuse me?
I'm in favor of a wide net. Don't
So-
put too many filters on it.
My bullet point that I would like to see somehow incorporated has to do with a preferred experience with building renovations, improvements, facilities, something along those lines.
How's everyone else feel about that?
I don't really feel that that is really appropriate to put into the job description for the superintendent, because really, that is the work of, it could be the work of the assistant superintendent or the CFO, or, I mean,
And that's something you can
that's
ferret out
just
during
one
it.
facet of the superintendent's
Right.
job. I mean, if we,
And it's actually the BA certification that covers building construction. So there's 6 major aspects. It's a very broad certification, and that's the person really, either if you're gonna build a new building, then it's a multi-million-dollar building, then you're gonna have the BA and the committee work with to find an architect and go from there. It's a huge project, and generally, if it's a new building, you're looking at outsourcing some of that as well. Superintendents do have some involvement in some areas, but typically it's not in their certification. It's specifically in the BA certification.
so is there any more discussion on the job description? I don't think we really need a vote per se, but Kristen just wanted to bring it to the board so that the board would be aware that this is going to be posted. Everybody all set?
So this is the advertisement.
Yeah, it's not the
Yeah,
job
I'm sorry, not
description,
the
it's
job
the,
description.
yeah.
I'm sorry, that's why I keep
Getting
getting-
late for me, getting
Okay.
late for me. It's
Okay. No, that's
it's
fine.
the advertisement.
So I just had one little quibble with the word earned doctorate. I mean, is there any other kind?
Well,
An
the
hon- oh,
the
an
reason
honorary.
you say earned doctorate
Honorary
is to
doctorate.
distinguish it from an ABD, which is all but dissertation, correct, Dr. Cochran?
That's usually the title.
That's the
There's 2 or 3
distinguishing.
different language choices in there, depending on how broad you want it to make it or not. You know, so that could be wordsmithed fairly easily.
I mean, I understand why you're saying it's kind of weird to say that, but that's indicative that you've actually got the degree, because some people will say they've got a doctorate when their dissertation's not done. They've passed all their qualifying exams. This means that you want the doctorate done before they're.
Yeah. And one of the issues in hiring a superintendent if it's someone who's not been a superintendent before, is the workload of coming in and ramping up is significant. And if you're not finished the doctorate, you're putting the candidate in a compromising position.
Okay. All right, so you want them
Unless-
done, you don't
unless
want them,
bring somebody
their
during
attention's
COVID, in
divided.
which case it's a snap.
Sorry, Brian. Oh, boy. The last paragraph, just to bring it to everyone's attention, talks about we offer a multi-year contract. Does anyone have an objection to that language? Okay, and then obviously the November 2nd date is a little too soon. We're going to change that to December 1st.
First screening.
For first screening. Because I'll clean this up a little bit, and or Brian, I don't know if I'll clean it up and we'll get it posted. For next week is what Sandra and I talked about. We'll finish it up tomorrow, clean it up, get it posted next week, and go from there. Any thoughts, suggestions, questions?
Thank you for doing this.
Do we know when most districts try, I didn't look back and, to see, but when most districts look to lock in their superintendent hires for the following year? I'm just thinking about that end of February date, and is that a little later, and do we risk having people go under contract elsewhere if they're finalists in multiple districts?
Well, you asked me what date do we want to have it. That's like my final date. I mean, if we start, like I said, screening through in December, we're trying to realistically think of committee, getting everyone together, doing this realistically, holidays, COVID, everything else, and having that first interview. So that's why we're shooting for the beginning of January. It's all going to depend on, and we have two candidates. We have a huge pool of qualified. It's going to do everything different. But I think the goal is to be done the process and by the end of February.
I think that's early, actually, because I see a lot of announcements the March, April, May timeframe. So we're ahead of the game if we can get somebody by February. We won't be we're not going to be in a situation where somebody has another offer probably, because most people are just a tad bit later than that. So I think this is a good time frame to try to lock somebody in, if you could try to get the offer and the contract out by the end of February.
And candidates will clearly know early on that they're in the process, so.
Okay. Thanks, Kristen. Moving on to the administrator's report, I think we need to accept a donation.
Two donations?
2 donations. So, I can read these out, or do you want to?
No, go ahead.
So, there are 2 donations.
Can you tell I'm not big on the administrator's report?
I can tell.
Everything else we did at the start was basically the administrator's report.
I know.
So I'm still trying to figure out what that's supposed to be.
Okay. Sandown North has received a donation. Hannaford's has reached out to area schools for quite a long time, and the program provides financial and other forms of support at the local level to eligible nonprofits. Hannaford helps schools, gives dollars back to schools that are registered for the program based on the purchases of designated Hannaford's products made by community members. So I'm looking for the board to accept the donation from Hannaford's for $585 for the 2019 Hannaford Helps program, and a second check for the 2020 Hannaford's Help program of $792.
For Sandown North.
For Sandown North.
So moved.
Second.
Sheila makes the motion, Brian seconds. All in favor? 8-0. The next donation by Hannaford Helps is to the Timberlane Regional Middle School. And we're looking to accept 3 checks here. $864, $1,000, and $1,128. These checks will go into the student activity account to help fund school-wide programs for the Timberlane Middle School community.
So moved.
Sheila makes a motion.
Second.
Kristen can have it.
Kristen seconds. All in favor? Okay. It looks like we have 1 professional retirement, Patricia Fanning, Timberlane Regional Middle School Counselor, 32 years.
recommend that the board accept the recommendation of Patricia Fanning, who was in her 33rd year of service by the sound of it as TRMS counselor, and also request that the board chair send a letter with that thanking her for her service.
Okay, so looking for a motion?
So made.
With gratitude?
With gratitude.
Kristen makes the motion. Sean makes the motion.
Second.
Sheila seconds. All in favor? Okay. Do we have any committee reports? CIP committee met, right? Brian?
Okay, the CIP committee met, and as discussed earlier, we have decided we want to concentrate a lot on HVAC systems as well as roofs. A lot of the, some of our projects were pushed to out years. We're trying to concentrate on what we can do this year, as we talked a little bit about tonight. And hopefully, at the next board meeting, we're going to have hard numbers and real projects for the board to weigh in on. That's it.
All set. I don't remember if we had an energy committee meeting or not, Barbara, between the last meeting, but you should, you want to talk about the check we received?
Gosh, I can't remember the exact amount, but yes,
right
we got a
around-
wonderful, largely $36,000 check for LED lights for reimbursing for those. So that was a really wonderful thing. Thank you, Mr. Paradis.
And that's another thing that we should be looking at for capital, in the current operating budget, to spend more. We spent about $50,000 on those LED lights, got about $36,000 back, and the energy savings will probably make a break even in probably under 2 years. So, so we would probably, Energy Committee would like us to move forward with more of those, and we have money in the current operating budget. I think we should do that.
Absolutely.
I am going to be looking to go into a non-public under 91A, colon 3, paragraph 2.
Curriculum and assessment.
Sorry?
Curriculum and
Oh, I'm
assessment.
sorry, I forgot that.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So we did meet, we had some longer, I think, than planned, but very good discussions about foreign language program, PE credit, graduation credits, and we're looking to have some recommendations to the board for the program of studies review in December. Summer work procedure is also in the pipeline. And Sandy, I don't know if I'm forgetting anything. Is that it? Okay.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. Barbara?
So we mentioned PE credit. One of the things that Commissioner Edelblue mentioned was they are trying to encourage people to allow outside activities to have credit, so that can take some of the load off of gym class. So, people who are taking gym class remote, you can do karate or dance class or whatever you're doing outside.
For this particular year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have not heard that from him, but we're looking at program of studies for next year.
Okay.
Barbara, I'll send that, what you sent, or you can send it to Jen, because there was some really interesting information in there that would be pertinent to curriculum stuff.
Yep.
Okay, anything else before we go into a non-public?
Will there be any action after the non-public?
No, I
Okay,
do not
thank you.
anticipate that. We will not come back into a public, we'll come back to just close the meeting out. So I'm looking at entering into non-public under 91A, colon 3, paragraph 2, A and C.
So made.
Sean makes the motion.
Second.
Jen seconds. Kat, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we'll, this will end our public viewing for tonight. We can shut